Welcome to Wines We Drink, a podcast for wine lovers and learners. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy Varnum, and together with my counterpart Keith Herndon, we'll be exploring a new wine each week. Keith is a lover of wine, and I'm a learner of wine, and we hope you'll sip along with us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wines We Drink, our podcast project that lets us drink a wonderful wine and share our thoughts about it with you. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy Varnum, and with me, as always, is my co-host Keith Herndon, a certified wine sommelier.
Hello, Charlotte. It's great to be with you in my wine kitchen recording another episode today. You know, we're here for our 11th episode in what we call our case of episodes, right?
So what did we call this episode last year?
Yeah. Come on, you get it.
Penultimate. It's our penultimate episode, the next to last in season 4. It's unbelievable how fast this summer is flying by this year. We'll have our winter woolies on in no time.
No, you will not. No.
Oh, no. I know.
Hold on. Okay. I mean, really, let's step the brakes on the winter woolies. We still have another week of the show, and you can't deprive me of fall football. Okay.
Fair enough. Yep.
So there's a ways to go before we start with those winter woolies again, right? Okay. But I will admit that we talked about last week's red blend is a perfect wine for our Christmas parties.
You're right.
So I guess there was some winter planning on your brain there, right?
I mean, last week's wine was a special one. It was a red blend from Canada's British Columbia. If you missed that episode, you can check it out along with all of our previous episodes from any season on the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We also have an episode guide at wineswedrink.com. So now let's focus on today's show. Keith, what are we drinking today?
Well, Charlotte, last week's red blend was made in the style of a French Bordeaux, but today we're actually drinking a French Bordeaux.
Okay, wonderful. I'm looking forward to this. We need a primer, though, on what you mean by French Bordeaux.
Well, to understand French Bordeaux means understanding the region, right? And understanding there is the left bank versus the right bank. Essentially, Bordeaux is really two wine regions separated by a large estuary and two rivers, the Dordogne and the Garonne. The right bank is north of the Dordogne, the left bank, right, is south of the Garonne River. So left and right don't actually line up with the geography of north and south.
Right. I was like,
and that can be confusing,
me.
Right? Okay.
Right.
So our wine today is from the left bank in an appellation known as Bordeaux Supérieur.
Ooh. So are there characteristics of these two areas that kind of help set them apart?
Well, yeah. I mean, Wine Folly tells us the left bank is known for its gravelly soils and blends that are typically dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon, right? The right bank is known more for red clay soils, and its blends are usually dominated by Merlot. So that would be typical. Right?
Yeah, so by you saying that, I have a suspicion that you're not going with a typical wine.
Well, you know me well, okay? Where's the fun in sticking with the typical, right? I mean, we have to think outside of the box, get outside of our comfort zone, all of those cliches, right? You know, today's wine selection is not typical.
Okay, so let's hear it. What are we drinking and why is it so different?
Well, today's bottle is a 2019 Chateau Lacombe Cadio, and as I mentioned, it's from the left bank in the Medoc area to be more specific. But what's unusual about this wine is that its blend is the exact opposite of the Cab Sauv dominated left bank profile. Our wine today is 80% Merlot and only 20% Cabernet Sauvignon.
How did that happen?
Well, I'm going to chalk this one up to the winemaker understanding what he had in terms of quality fruit, and he went with it, right?
Yep.
A column about this vintage by Greg Sherwood, a master of wine, described its winemaker, Jean-Michel Garcillon, as, quote, one of the most talented winemakers in Bordeaux at the moment, end quote.
Wow. Well, that's an excellent setup. I'm ready to sample some of this talented winemaker's product. Would you mind pouring us some glasses?
Yes. I've had this decanting for about 45 minutes, which is more than enough time for this to breathe and unwind a little bit. So let me pour your glass, Charlotte.
Okay. Since the wine was sitting here in the decanter, I kind of got a sneak peek. I could see that it's a deep, dark wine. As you're pouring it, though, it's taking on some more reddish hues than it looks like it would have. I don't know. I'm going to call this like a garnet color. It has a jewelly tone to it. Maybe ruby?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a richness to this wine's color. No doubt about that at all.
Well, it's time for that first smell, eh?
This wine is intensely aromatic. I mean, the black fruits are there, blackberry and blackcurrant, as you would expect from this blend. But what else are you detecting?
Yeah.
I mean, I've already told you the fruits, right?
I know. But even then, I mean, as I was picking up the glass and just bringing it in the general vicinity of my nose, I was like, whoa, that intensity, in a good way, as you were describing, it's definitely there. But I think that intensity maybe is coming in from some cocoa or chocolate nuttiness, maybe. Those are some pretty bold flavors.
Oh, absolutely. Those fruit notes are definitely there, but those notes that you mentioned, some people might refer to them as secondary notes, but I don't necessarily think they're secondary here, right?
I would agree.
So your aromas were absolutely on point. I read one review describing the aroma as the Ferrero Rocher candy, which is chocolate and hazelnut, right?
I love that candy. Yeah, it's that that candy wrapped in the golden tinfoil.
Yeah,
Excellent description of that aroma. Fruity and, hazelnutty, chocolatey. I think it's time to go in for our first sips. I'm really eager to see what layers unfold next here.
Yeah, so let's go in there for that sip. I love this stuff. So what do you think?
Whoa. That is like a flavor bomb. I mean, it is wonderfully fruity and kind of minerally. I mean, tannic, maybe even a little salty. I mean, you're getting all of this, again, all at once. And it's a lot to take in a really good way. I'm really enjoying it. Let me have another taste.
Sure. Yeah, there are a lot of fruit flavors in this wine, more so than I would have expected, right? It's bright with cherry and blueberry.
Yeah, I think those dark berries, like we like to talk about here with these rich red wines. I got to go back to blackberry. I mean, are there others that you're tasting though?
Yeah, blackcurrant.
Ooh.
I'm going to stay with the black theme and say black cherry.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mentioned blueberry. That comes to it all comes together at the end though with some plum jamminess.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, it is quite the collection of those flavors, and they're all being complemented in there by some subtle spices, maybe even some cloves. I mean, it's more savory. Would that come from some of the oak aging?
Yeah, that's a good thought, right? I suspected the same thing, right?
Suspected.
Suspected, right?
Keyword.
But I consulted the specification sheet that the winery produced for this wine, and believe it or not, there is no oak.
Okay.
The skins are kept in contact with the juice for up to 30 days in stainless steel vats. And following the fermentation, the wine is aged for 12 months, but also all in stainless steel.
I mean, that is so interesting, but you really can't argue with the results.
No, not at all.
Excellent.
But there is some oak qualities to this wine, even though it all came from the skin contact and no oak barrels.
Surprising.
Right. The spec sheet says the, quote, techniques favoring the natural concentration of the grapes, end quote, contribute to a wine that is fruity, round, and rich.
Round. That's a great description. Fruity, round, and rich. It really describes this wine to a T, from the nose to the palate through to the finish. It's complex and it unfolds nicely and allows you to enjoy each sip, but you just get so excited by that initial flavor hit. It's really awesome.
Yeah, I certainly enjoyed reading the many reviews of this wine. I mentioned the candy reference, but there are some other interesting descriptions out there. One described the aromas as having notes of pencil shavings, right? I guess that was kind of the minerality, maybe. The woody. Another described one of its flavors as an exotic note of hoisin plum sauce.
Oh,
and maybe that was some of that jamminess that I talked about, right? And then another described it as having a flavor of a smoky creme de cassis.
Wow. Those are such colorful descriptions. I mean, I love the pencil shavings one. I mean, it kind of, these descriptions are things I would never say, but it does, like you say, capture that woodiness and some of that minerality. I'm not arguing against any of these. They all really kind of work when you say them out loud. And that really establishes this wine's complexity. So, therefore, how would you pair this wine with some food?
Well, let's start with its alcohol content before we actually talk about specific food, okay?
Okay.
At 14% alcohol by volume, this is in the sweet spot to work with a lot of foods without imparting any alcohol burn, right? We're dealing with fruitiness, some minerality, some tannins. So I think this is a wine that needs a strong cheese partner. So I'm going to go with Gorgonzola. Okay. This cheese is going to be salty, and the veining will add some bite to it. But there will also be some grassy undertones in the cheese. And I think that works really nicely with this wine that is heavily dominated by their Merlot part of the blend, right? So I've placed some Gorgonzola here on some crackers there. So please, go and give that a try with some sips of our wine.
Okay.
And I'm going to join you with a bite here.
Oh, wow. You are right about that cheese having a little bite to it. It's really perfect, though, for this kind of wine. The acidity and the tannins can take it. Both things can have a seat in your mouth.
Right.
It's a great pairing.
Yeah, go back and have another taste.
Okay.
Well, because I really think it's important to understand that with this Gorgonzola cheese, it's the blue veining that gives it that little bite.
Right.
That works so nicely with this.
Right.
You'll often see a Gorgonzola cheese suggested as a pairing directly if you're drinking a pure Merlot.
Right.
Right? And so this is a heavy Merlot-dominated blend. The Gorgonzola just is a natural fit for it.
It definitely makes sense. I mean, I think earlier I described some of these initial sips of the wine as being like a flavor bomb, and Gorgonzola and a cheese like it fits the bill too, right? It, as soon as you take a bite, it is like an explosion. And so together, they just really, they're a powerhouse pairing, I would say.
I would describe Gorgonzola as a flavor bomb of a cheese, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it goes with this flavor bomb of a wine, quite nicely.
Absolutely. When we're thinking about food and taking this further, do we follow the same logic of the Gorgonzola selection? What kind of food would you pair with this wine?
Well, the standard answer will be red meat, beef
True.
and lamb. But if you want to think a bit differently, I think it works nicely with grilled salmon.
Ooh.
That's been marinated in a bourbon sauce.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
The salmon is a fatty enough fish to stand up to this wine, and the smoke from the grill and a little burn from the bourbon sauce, and it's going to match up, nicely with all of the wine's complexities. Think about a little bit of the salmon being the fatty fish, kind of like the main part of our cheese.
Right.
And then that bourbon sauce adding a little bit of that veining to it, right?
A little tang,
and it's just going to be a really good compliment, I think, to the wine.
I mean, I think that actually sounds delicious to me. I love salmon, so give me any excuse to eat it. And putting this on my grilling list to try this in the near future, it's a done deal. I mean, you now have to tell me though. And tell our listeners how much this wonderful French Bordeaux is going to set us back.
Well, I need to give you a little bit more history first. This estate has a documented royal pedigree.
Uh-oh.
Okay. According to its website, the chateau once belonged to King Louis XIV, the Sun King. And he reportedly enjoyed hunting the land. The king eventually turned the estate over to Sir Lacombe, which is where that part of the name comes from.
Okay.
Right? So there is a royal lineage to this winery. In more modern times, in 2004, the chateau and its beautiful vineyards and grounds became the fifth estate acquired by the De Schepper family, and they own it today, right?
Was that set up about royal lineage to sort of soften the blow on when you're going to tell us how expensive this wine is?
Charlotte, that's not how this works, okay?
I know, I'm waiting for the bait and switch, though.
Right, not on this show, right? We're after value propositions, those wines that deliver quality at really good price points. But before I share the price, let me tell you, I first discovered this wine after reading that it scored 97 points.
Whoa.
And took a Best in Show award at the 2020 Decanter World of Wine Awards. So the bottle I opened today even has that little 97-point sticker on the label.
So you're telling me that a 97-point wine from a French chateau, once owned by King Louis XIV, isn't going to be expensive?
That's exactly what I'm going to tell you. This wine retails for $15.
What? Oh no. $15? I can't even believe that.
Well, that's why I describe this wine as perhaps my best rating find of the year. It's a great wine, and you can get it for well under $20, right?
Wow.
I should add that this wine sold really well after it captured that score. Okay, but don't despair if you can't find the 2019, or if your wine shop can't order it for you. You can easily opt for the 2022 vintage. It's also amazing, and it recently captured a gold medal in the 2023 Sommelier's Choice Awards, along with being named a Wine of the Year in its category.
I mean, Keith, this is insane. I mean, you've given us another win on Wines We Drink, and like you said, one of the biggest wins. I'm really still just marveling that a 97, like A+ point French Bordeaux is selling for $15. I'm going to have to think about that for a long time while we take our short break. So, listeners, you marinate on that as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back in a moment with the portion of the show that we call The Finish. Keith is going to talk more about the Bordeaux region and its importance to the wine world. Welcome back, everyone, to Wines We Drink. This is the portion of the show that we call The Finish. Today, Keith and I are following up on our excellent French Bordeaux with some more discussion about the Bordeaux region.
Thanks, Charlotte. Before the break, you set up this segment by mentioning the Bordeaux region's importance to the wine world. I can't emphasize that enough, okay? Bordeaux is important, and it's going through a lot at the moment, okay? And how it emerges on the other side will go a long way in determining the future of wine, not only in Bordeaux, but around the world.
I mean, it sounds like that's a pretty serious change taking place. Could you explain that?
Yeah, let's start by explaining the sheer magnitude of Bordeaux, first of all. It encompasses nearly 275,000 acres divided into 53 appellations. The geography and climate has been historically perfect for making wine, and they've been doing it for 2,000 years, right? Today, there are about 6,000 wineries responsible for some of the most expensive and sought-after wines in the world, as some of the best quality, most affordable bargains as represented by the wine we drink today. So here's an amazing statistic from Wine Folly. A bottle of Bordeaux wine is sold somewhere in the world every 20 seconds.
Whoa, okay. Well, that's a pretty good case for the magnitude of Bordeaux and its influence. What are the chinks in its armor?
There are many, okay? First, the pricing system there is under attack. I'm just going to say it's far too complicated to fully explain in our type of podcast that we do. But let's just say that its pricing system dates back to the 1800s and it needs reform. And I'm just going to say that's a lot of inside baseball that we'll kind of skip over. But there are lots of other issues that are more readily apparent. The first one is production imbalance. And then a more long-term issue is how they will deal with climate change.
So let's start with production then. What do you mean by an imbalance?
Trade magazines report that annual overproduction is about 40 million bottles.
Wow.
Okay? It's so staggering that the French government is paying Bordeaux grape growers to rip out at least 10% of their planted vines. France is the world's largest wine producer according to the 2023 data, and Bordeaux led the way. Overall, production is running 3% above the 5-year average. Unfortunately, that production success it's just at odds with consumption trends around the world, which is declining.
Right. So supply and demand aren't matching up. So consumers then aren't drinking enough wine to buy all that's produced.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've seen wine demand falling for a while now, right? Younger people aren't drinking as much wine, and there's a lot of stiff competition from alternative beverages across all demographics. But what this means for Bordeaux is particularly acute. I mean, export volume fell 12% last year. That's not good when you're growing more grapes and making more wine than ever. So something has to change, and they're beginning to address that by forcing some production cuts.
Is one area of this market more impacted than others?
Well, that's a great question. The data suggests that the high end of the market is faring much better than the low end of the market. I think there is an emphasis on maintaining quality and the profitability of premium wines, but that brings us to the issue of climate change and maintaining the quality of wine Bordeaux is known for, right?
Yeah, and climate change is recognized as a massive issue for winemaking around the world. What does it mean for Bordeaux in particular?
Well, a couple of years ago, Wine Enthusiast magazine published an article that was as succinct as it could be. Quote, "Bordeaux is in crisis. It's a slow, simmering crisis, but a crisis nevertheless. Climate change is altering the region, and it can't be ignored," end quote. The regulators there are now beginning to recognize this and are taking steps to make sure the region can remain sustainable. You know, already they've approved 4 new red grape varietals and 2 new white varietals that will give growers more flexibility in finding grapes that will be better suited for hotter and drier growing seasons in the years to come. It's a conundrum, right? They have plenty of production now, but that may not be the case in future years as climate impacts production and the quality of that production.
And approving new varietals, I mean, that's progress. But as one of those younger wine consumers that you mentioned earlier, how does Bordeaux overcome a stodgy traditional reputation and appeal to my generation?
Well, you know, that's really an issue. Stodgy and traditional is the way a lot of people would describe Bordeaux. You know, I think they have to find ways to keep making wonderful, affordable wines like the one we featured today. They can't go all the way to premium and expect to attract a younger wine drinker. They also have to do more to tell the story that appeals to younger drinkers. An article in Drinks Business noted that more than 75% of the Bordeaux vineyards have some type of certified environmental approach, and 25% are organic or in conversion to organic viticulture. I mean, that's an important story to tell and one that will resonate with younger drinkers, but I just don't think they do enough to get that word out.
Right. I mean, all of those statistics that you described would absolutely, I think, of the folks that I know, would change consumer habits. And, you know, those statistics suggest that there's even more progress for Bordeaux and its place in the future of wine. Super fascinating and gives me a lot to think about as a young generation. I will be the one that I'll purchase some of this wine. Well, and that'll wrap us up. That'll be the finish for today's episode. Some really heady issues as we head into our last episode next week. How are we going to bring season 4 to a close?
Well, we're going to be staying in France and drinking a bottle of wine that, like today's selection, is not what you'd expect. It's a bottle from a famous French region, but it's not what made the region famous.
Oh, well, that sounds promising. That's another wine that will surprise us in a great way to end the season. Until next week, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Wines We Drink. Listen to our other episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Wines We Drink, and check out our episode guides at wineswedrink.com. Cheers.